Okay, hello and welcome to the live stream for December 26, 2018. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We normally go for 3 hours, but since I am on vacation and out of town, we're just going to go for 2 hours tonight. So if you are new here, welcome. And if you are returning here, welcome. So Eileen is here. Welcome, Eileen. Kamami says, hello, everyone. I hope that you had an amazing Christmas. Yeah, my Christmas was pretty good. I'm here in Colorado, and it's been a little stressful but for reasons having to do with the house. We have to be out of our apartment. The insurance will not pay for our apartment any longer because we were supposed to only be in there for I think like 4 or 5 months, and it's been, I think we're going on 8 months now. So uh but I don't think they're going to be done fixing the house by the end of this month because they really only have 2 working days left because the 31st is a holiday. So we have been so stressed out, and poor Travis is there by himself, and he's been running back and forth and checking on it to see, you know, how things are coming along. And it's just biting our nails. We have to get all the final inspections done. And but it is what it is. We're thankful to have a house, and thankful, lots to be thankful for. So Tanya says, hello from Mexico. Thanks for your help. Very cool. Tanya, I'm glad that these live streams do help. And it's so fun meeting people from all over the world on here. Metamorphosis, Rob says, ugh. Yeah, good times. Travis texted the head contractor today, and he said, I just want you to know that I'm having a lot of anxiety about you guys getting done at the end of this month. And the contractor, his name's Todd. Todd texted him back and said, oh, I know, me too. It's like, no, this is not what you want to hear from your contractor. And I was like, well, then do something, like work on the weekends. I don't know, like you guys need to figure it out. Why are things not progressing? Travis even went to the house last weekend and was painting, doing stuff that they should be doing, because he is like, there's no way that this stuff is going to be dry by the time that we've got to move in. And yikes, crazy. Torstein, I'm not sure if I'm saying that name right, I probably am not, says, I'm sending you love from Norway. Well, thank you so much. That is so cool. Let's see. Teacher Spring says, I did great through Christmas, no contact with family, lots of fun stuff with my kiddos, but today I'm in a funk. I feel lonely. Why do you think that is? Do you normally feel lonely after the holidays or after Christmas is over? Is it just kind of going from doing lots of fun stuff with the kids to normal life? Magella, I'm also probably saying that wrong. It says, hi from Ireland. Very cool. Let me scroll up here. See, oh, and before I forget, we are having book club tomorrow night at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Shay is going to be rejoining us. For those of you that remember Shay, she was on, it's been a while, at least 6 months or so. She's fantastic. So she'll be back. And yeah, we're discussing the workbook. It's the self-esteem workbook. So let's see here. Kiara. Oh, Julia says, I sent something to your PO box. Very cool. I I haven't been in town for about 2 weeks, but I will uh, hit my PO box as soon as I return. Surf Smurf says, "Can anybody join the book club?" Are you talking like the video portion of it or just the chat portion? I guess the chat portion, anybody is more than welcome. The video section, I'm not. It used to be it was just open to whoever wanted to hop on, and uh, I think I might kind of rethink that because it can be a lot of people and it can be kind of chaotic having that many people on. So I don't know. I think it would be kind of cool to figure out a way to do either some sort of like literal call-in show or to have like a video call-in show where people can participate more, because I think that's uh, where a lot of the magic happens, is hearing from other people and their perspective. So that's something I'd like to look into in 2019. Let's see. Jessica says, did your narcissist put their friends ahead of you? Um, Mine didn't really have any friends. Um, the first one had a friend, but ironically, he was a therapist. He was only, he lived about 3 hours away and would come to where we lived, the area that we lived, every other weekend or kind of however often he could get away from work. We lived in more of like a vacation type place. So it's really common though for narcissists to put in general, their wants and needs first across the board. So whatever it might be, their friends, um, their lovers, their hobbies, their work, you name it. Their stuff always comes first. Yeah, Surf Smurf says mine did, and he was sleeping with all of them. Missouri Cowboy says, yeah, if you could put a voice to some of the names in chat, I like that. Yeah, I like that too. I think that would be really cool. Because I feel like everybody knows, for most people in the chat, you guys are here every single week. So I feel like you guys know each other just as well as you know me. And it would be kind of fun just to, I don't know, to open that chat up. Hey, James, while I see you on, are you going to be on book club tomorrow night? If not, that's totally fine. I just wasn't sure if you got my email or not. Let's see. Sansu Wellness says, Dana, can you explain why I feel like I don't fit in no matter where I am? Did you feel like this before your relationship, before this toxic relationship in your life, or have you kind of always felt that way? I guess that would be where I would start with that. Okay, James is going to be in book club tomorrow night. Okay, cool. Just making sure. I know it's holidays and, people are busy and doing stuff. No worries. He says, I'm ready mostly. I'm ready mostly too as well. I have a lot to do tomorrow. Let's see here. Wanda says, hello, can you help me? I am new. Wanda, if you want, there's lots of people, these people that are in the chat generally have been here for a very long time. Most of them have been here for years. So if I can't get to your question, a lot of them have really fantastic advice and insight and can help you just as much as me. But by all means, go ahead and type in whatever question you might have. And James or any other admin, Missouri Cowboy, if you could kind of try to signal to me. And Wanda, I'll keep a lookout for your questions so we can get you some help if you're really kind of in a crisis position right now. Okay, oh boy, Michael. Michael, I hope that this is, that you're not meaning this, but on the offhand chance that you are, he says, give me a reason to not kill myself. Who? Well, I would tell you, if you truly are suicidal, the reason I would give you is that ending your life doesn't stop the pain, it just gives it to somebody else. And I know when a person feels so low, it can seem like it doesn't matter, but it does. And the people that you might not even realize that care about you will carry that for decades. And it's just, I would just encourage you to get help. There's suicide hotlines that are 24 hours a day. There's resources out there, and whatever you're going through right now, please, I guess, just know that the pain isn't always this heavy, and it doesn't last forever. It really, really doesn't. So I'm sorry if you're really feeling this low. I have been at that place a handful of times in my life, and that's a really hard place to be. Yeah, James says, is it okay to put the suicide hotline in the chat? Yes, absolutely, James. And also, just for anybody else, they also have a text line. So if you're not comfortable talking to a person, but you feel like you just need some help, they have a text line that's 24/7 as well. Marie says, I was there and it gets better. It really does go away. Please do not kill yourself. And Cheesy Allen says, I've been there also. Michael says, thanks so much. Okay, cool. James just posted the number. He says 1-800-273-8255. And Torstein says, stay alive, Michael. You have value and we need you in this world. Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you really are feeling that you need help immediately, you can also call 911 if you're here in the United States and say, I feel like I'm a danger to myself and I just need to be somewhere. And they might have you go someplace under observation for like the next 72 hours. But yes, please talk to somebody. Slavic Princess says, Michael, I was almost suicidal as well. I had severe anxiety attacks and overcame them. Yes. Oh, good. I'm glad Michael says you guys are really super helpful. Thanks. And I guess the question too would be, Michael, is there anything that we can do to support you tonight since you're here? Let us know. There's, like I said, there's people in the chat. There's 84 people here right now. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up. Yeah, Steve is saying, I feel you, Michael, but hang in there. You are worth it. I wish I could talk to you because we've all been there. Yes, and it can be such a scary place to be at. Okay, Wanda is saying, I am married to a narcissist. He uses our children. He is a manipulator and a liar, and I'm tired. No one is listening. What do I do? He's talking about me on Facebook and has brainwashed our children. Your situation is all too common. I have pretty much yet to hear of a person who is going through a divorce or trying to co-parent with a narcissist who's not in a very similar situation. So here's what I would recommend. There's a couple things. There's a book out there called Divorce Poison. It's fantastic. Let me see, I redid my website. Let me just make sure I can find my notes. I took notes on the book if you want to just kind of read the condensed version, but there's so much in the book. I really just recommend reading the book. I would start there. It really talks about how to handle an ex who's incredibly manipulative, especially when it comes to children. So let me see. I'm on my website right now. I'm looking. Well, oh, here it is. Okay. I'm going to post the link in the chat for you. If you're interested in support groups, I have a support group. I have two. They're free. There's one on my website, which is thriveafterabuse.com. And then there's one on Facebook. There's one on Facebook. My group there is also, there's a page and a group. They're both called Thrive After Abuse. So you really want to make sure that if you're opening up about deeply personal things, that you're joining the group and that you're not posting on the page. I'm not sure if you do Facebook or not, but there's a lot of groups out there for parenting exactly your situation. That can be a really great resource. If you do decide to go the Facebook route, I would strongly encourage you to create a fake profile, which would entail creating an alternate email and then joining Facebook under that email, creating a fake name. So I don't know, Wilhelmina Smith. And then if you put pictures on that profile, make sure that they're not real pictures of you or pictures that you've used anywhere else, so that that your ex or anybody else could Google it and find you. And you also want to make sure to not friend the same people that you had friended under your old profile name. So once you have this fake profile created, then go about joining different support groups on this topic. Because if you join a support group under your current profile, even if, and correct me if I'm wrong, people out there that know Facebook better than me, for sure you want to lock down your privacy to where only your Facebook friends can see your status updates, that can see your profile information. But I don't know if the groups that you're in, if other people can still see that. I think it is a setting within Facebook that you can turn off so nobody can see what groups you're in. Definitely do that. But even though it's a closed group, we get a lot of times people's exes will sneak into the group, or they'll have friends sneak into the group, and that's, we want to avoid that at all, if possible, because it's not a safe place, and we want to make sure to do that. That's a good point. Oh, Maluk says, make your Facebook name look like a real name or Facebook might ban you. Yes. So maybe, Wendy, I don't know, some sort of Wendy Jackson or something like that. And then the pictures, are legit looking. And Taldanam says, Wanda, what you are experiencing is called a smear campaign. I'd like to say that what others say about you does not define you, particularly if they are lies. Your own actions define you. Yes, I agree. And having a smear campaign launched against you is so incredibly painful, and it's enraging, especially if you know the truth and you're like, it's just so, it's so awful, because it's bad enough to go through abuse of any kind and to be victimized that way. And then the smear campaign and blaming you, and then them pretending to be the victim. There's so many other layers to this. It feels like this avalanche of re-victimization, and it can be a lot, but this is very common. And the smear campaign, where there's just outright lies, where they're making themselves into the victim, is in manipulating the children, and of course, leaving out what they did. If anything, it just speaks to the pathology of how they think. Normal people don't do this, and it's just. I agree. I'm a big fan of try to just focus on your character. Your reputation can be anybody's reputation can be easily tarnished. It's what your character is what matters. And depending on how old your children are, there's a lot of tips in that Divorce Poison book about how to kind of go about disabling manipulation with them. So, and realizing if they're acting up, if they're coming over to your house, or even if they live with you, if they're acting up, they're becoming, hateful or aggressive towards you, that a lot of that has to do with what your ex is telling them. So it's not that they're misbehaving, it's that they're lashing out because they've been given false information. So really letting them know, this is a safe place. I love you guys so much. I don't know I want us to be able to talk about things. And if you have any questions, if you have any, hurt feelings, if there's anything that you want to discuss, I want us to be able to discuss it. I love you guys so much. And um, I, I want us to have a good relationship. And hopefully when they're older and they're, out on their own, they'll see things through more of an adult perspective. Because right now, children are just going to see things through that child's mind. But as an adult, you kind of develop more perspective and you just see things totally different. So hopefully that will be the case. But I would I would say get in some support groups. It really does help to just vent and to be heard by people that have been there, done that. Ugh, Miriam says, I had to erase my Instagram and put his email in my spam and then erase Snapchat, erase my Facebook account, change every number, change iCloud, blocked him from everywhere. And he tried creating 15 fake accounts just this week. It's that persistence. And it's, it's exhausting and uh, yeah, it's exhausting. So for those of you that are new here, this kind of stuff, so what Miriam is talking about, where you've got a person that you've gone no contact with and they keep this level of persistence of trying to message you from multiple accounts, of coming by your work, of sending you dozens of emails, of just this unrelenting behavior. This is often confused by a lot of people as sincerity, because for normal decent people we think, well, surely they must really love you or be apologetic, because who on earth would go to such extremes in order to get a hold of you or to get your attention or to apologize or what have you. But that is not the case with narcissists and sociopaths. This kind of behavior it's all about control, and it's possessive, and it can be incredibly scary. And it's just important that we see it as the boundary violation, the continual boundary violations that it really is, and not mistake it for anything, romantic, because it's not. It's scary stuff. Uh, let's see here. Carson, it says hello from South Africa. Well, hello. Oh my gosh. Marie says, I'm in the medical field. My ex's new girlfriend called my work and tried to get me fired, saying I'd read her chart. I didn't even know her name and was cleared. That kind of stuff is just so outrageous, isn't it? And that stuff, at least you have um, more concrete proof that it would be easier to prove to prove harassment and to prove, uh, the level of harassment that this is impacting your work. But even still, then going to court and doing the stuff, it's just exhausting. And it can be difficult because they don't care. A lot of them don't respect restraining orders. They see things from their perspective, which is that they are the victim. And uh, or they've created this whole false narrative that they are the victim, and then they spread that false narrative to the new people in their life. So it's really common for the new girlfriend or boyfriend to become a flying monkey like that and to start going on the attack, because again, keep in mind, they've been told a bunch of lies. And if it had, and again, normal decent people, just we don't even think that stuff would possibly be untrue or only part of the story. I mean, most people, when they have a divorce or a breakup and they're dating again, they're able to see the fuller picture of, boy, you know what, and they're able to be accountable. This is the stuff that I did, this is the stuff that he did or she did, and there's more of a fuller picture. But with these kinds of relationships with narcissists especially, there's no account. It's amazing the behavior that they will do. I mean, let's just say, for example, that it's amazing the stuff that they'll gloss over. So they might say something like, oh, I can't believe, she's walking out after 15 years of marriage. And I just don't, she just didn't know what commitment meant. And to other people, they might say, oh, this poor person, he just, this poor man, he's just such a good man. And, the new girl is thinking she can be the one to be so good to him. But then the reality is, oh, he was cheating on you for 15 years, or he was horrifically abusive. And then you finally got tired of it and left. Like, he left out that piece, but just said, oh, you didn't want to work on things. You don't know what commitment is about, blah, blah, blah. It's amazing the stuff that they leave out. And then, of course, in time, the new person starts to see, uh, see a fuller picture and realize, okay, some of the stuff I've heard is not true. But because they've been manipulated, and they might even get full out lies. So they're at a minimum, they're going to get definitely a very edited version of the truth. They could just get full out lies of saying, oh, you abused the children, you did this, you did that, you're an alcoholic, you're crazy, you're bipolar, you're this, that, and the other. And none of it's true. And then the new person is being fed all this stuff, and then they go on the attack thinking, oh, she abused the kids, and you know I want to teach her a lesson, kind of a thing. It's craziness. That's why we really talk a lot about no contact as much as possible, just to get that peace back in your life as much as you possibly can. And um, at a minimum, to go gray rock, or just to become very like emotionally neutral if you have to be around them at all. And there's also too, back to the smear campaign thing. If you can keep things and keep a paper trail as much as possible. So if you're having to go back and forth with custody things, or uh, really anything, that way it's all, it's in black and white. It's through email, it's through text. It really avoid phone calls. You want to be able to prove whatever you have, whatever is going on in court. So think about it that way. Whatever you're saying can potentially, can be used in court for good or for bad. So just be careful, because while you might be keeping a paper trail, they might be too. And the other side of that, so what they might be doing, which is really common, is they will tend to needle a person. They'll poke and poke and poke, and they'll make snide comments. And it's really, really hard to not be reactive to stuff like that, especially when you've been victimized, when you've been so violated. And they've stolen from you, they've done horrific things, they just treated you terribly. And then to to say stuff like, oh, well, you didn't want to make the relationship work, and I guess you don't know what love is. And it takes a tremendous amount of self-restraint to not just want to yell at them and set them straight. But again, realize that they can take whatever you're saying and then create this edited version of the truth and say, oh, well, look at what he or she did, this person, my ex, is so unhinged, look how abusive they are to me. And oftentimes they will do that. So just be very aware of what you're putting in text and in email and these kinds of things. Oh, good. Victoria says, hey, Dana, hope you've been okay and that your holidays have been full of light. Thank you for the past year. It's been a long year, but through your repetition has helped me learn invaluably. That's good. I'm glad. Uh, I'm always a little bit, what's the word? Hesitant, cautious, concerned about how repetitive a lot of these my live streams can be. And I always hope that it is through that repetition that it helps validation, and for this kind of stuff for people to be reminded of it, and that it's not too just repetitious to the point of boring a person to tears. One of the things that I'd like to do in 2019 is to put together a playlist of really kind of common questions, and like start here, like the terms and definitions and just the basics of everything. So for those people that are new here, um, that they have a really solid starting place. I really need to redo so many of my videos. there's a lot of work that needs to happen on my channel. Uh, let's see here. Um, let me scroll up. We have Nina here from England who says it is 1:55 in the morning. I can't sleep and it's nice to have your support. Well, welcome, Nina. We're glad to have you at 2 o'clock in the morning. Let's see. My mom is actually going to London in a few months, and we were trying to find some things to do for her. I was in London, it's been probably 10 years. I was only there for a few days and we saw the like the armory and some of the crown jewels and I forget where all that's at, but it was so fascinating. So different, so much culture and history over there than there is here in the United States. Taldanam is talking to E Rock Freedom and says there is, however, something called reactive abuse, which is when the victim finally lashes out at the abuser. I did that once before I understood narcissistic personality disorder and before I went no contact. Yes. And you bring up a really great point because that reactive abuse, this happens and I get it, this happens so much and I totally understand why. But when a person gets out of an abusive relationship and there has been a lot of this reactive abuse involved, it's very common for them to start thinking, well, I wasn't perfect either, and I became really violent or abusive, and uh, you know and it can be hard to kind of tell who has the problem or who really was abusive. And it's definitely time to leave. If you're in a situation where you're like, this relationship is bringing out the worst in me, and you're having major personality changes to where you're becoming aggressive, you're becoming violent, um, the relationship just becomes so aggressive like that, it's time to just go. None of that's normal, especially if it hasn't been normal for you in the past with other people in your life. That kind of clues you into somebody's pushing your buttons. And yeah, it can just, I had a friend, this was years ago. I had a friend who was married to a guy who was a narcissist, and there wasn't there wasn't any verbal abuse going on, but he cheated on her nonstop. And she finally found out about it. She was in denial for a while. And anyways, he ended up getting another woman pregnant, and then Upton announced that he wanted a divorce out of the clear blue. And so, kind of long story short, they ended up reconciling, and then the other woman ended up not having the baby, and but then he continued to cheat on her. But he was just stonewalling her. He wouldn't give her any clarity, any closure, any reasons as to why. He would just give her the very bare minimum, and that kind of stuff is infuriating. And of course, like, it's the old saying of, it's not unresolved, it's not old issues that continue to come up, it's unresolved issues that come up. And there's this giant elephants in their room and nothing's getting resolved. And it was making her sick. She'd lost a bunch of weight, she wasn't sleeping, her hair was falling out. She just their relationship got to the point where it was physical, especially if she started drinking, because she just wanted answers. She wanted him to apologize and acknowledge it and to be invested in their marriage. And he was so just flat. He just didn't care at all. Like, he could not have been more calm, totally indifferent. And it was just outrageous. She finally ended up divorcing him, but it was long road. But there was a time I actually called the police on them because I was afraid that one of them, it was going to get so bad that I was afraid that she was going to kill him, because she was so angry, and he just refused to talk about it. He just refused to engage. He would just do whatever he wanted to do. He'd come home in the middle of the night. He'd spend money, pull money out of their account. He just didn't care. And it was pushing her to the edge. And I just thought, she's going to end up going to jail. And they've got 2 kids, and she's got to get out of there. But it's hard to unlock horns when you want answers. And I get that. I think that's a pretty normal human reaction. It's really hard to just walk away. And I think most people want that sense of justice, and they want that validation. You want to hear somebody admit, yeah, I've done X, Y, and Z wrong. I'm sorry. But to not get that is just, it's infuriating. Uh, let's see here. Oh gosh, Nina, you're so funny. This is the exact conversation I was having with Shay today. She says, "Can you talk about rabbit hole 1 and 2? I found that incredibly useful. Is there a rabbit hole 3 where you finally become healthy and realize that all of the learning we should have had from the start?" Yes. No, you're so spot on with that. I would say I'd have to write that down. Here's the thing. After these live streams, or I should say during these live streams, I don't well, as soon as we're done, I won't remember anything that I've said because I'm very caught up in the conversation, and it's always interesting to me when people will say, "Oh, well, you mentioned this," and it's just gone. so, uh, so I will do my best to try to remember what I said about these different rabbit holes, but I will say for sure in the book that I'm working on right now, it's called The Narcissist's Playbook. It's all about manipulation, ways to disable that manipulation, how to heal from it, and what healing really looks like. There's a whole section in the back, and there's I believe it's, yeah, seven stages of what I consider to be healing. And I would say most people don't get past stage 5. And I list out the reasons why that is. It's, this is a long, hard road if you're going down it alone and you have all this self doubt and you're not sure, is it me or is this other person? And there's a million different ways to fall off the path. And so the end of that book really spells it out of these are common struggles that people have at these different stages. But here's from a person who's been there and done that, and from a person who's had these support groups and has watched other people go through it and realizing it's not just my experience, but this is a very common shared experience. Here's kind of the roadmap, and these are some checkpoints. It's really important that people just go through this checklist and make sure that, okay, these are all the things that you've gotten squared away. Like, this is what complete healing looks like. So let me back up and try to address your question. Rabbit hole number 1, I would say, starts with a person realizing that not everybody is like them. And they normally come across the concept of narcissism or sociopathy, and it's like a light goes on. Like, oh my goodness, I knew what I was experiencing was way outside the realm of normal. This makes total sense. And then they kind of start going down that rabbit hole. Well, what is a narcissist? And then they start carving up the world. Well, they realize that their understanding of the world is incomplete. And so then they start trying to hi, kitty. Hold on a second. Kitty cat, what? Well, come here. Come here. I love you. Come here. So, so they start carving up the world in the way that they best understand it. And so it normally goes, they start thinking, okay, is this person a narcissist or is this person a normal person? It's kind of very black or white thinking. And that thinking tends to kind of be, well, if this person is a narcissist, then it's a problem. But if they're not a narcissist, then it's workable. And so then they're kind of in this place of figuring that out. And that takes a while to kind of just get their sea legs about narcissism and sociopaths and all of that. The second rabbit hole, let me scroll down and see if anybody. Oh, well, thank you, Life Survival, for the live stream donation. Says, thank you, Dana. Merry Christmas. Hope this will help with your house repairs. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Missouri Cowboy says, oh, Kitty's gone. Yes, the kitty. His name is Mr. Kitty. That's actually his name. He is the world's nicest cat. He is such a cuddle bug. So hopefully he'll come back. Yes, I'm talking about you, Mr. Kitty. He is a sweetheart. I'm surprised he jumped down. He's normally a lap cat. He'll sit on your lap until you can't handle it anymore and for hours. So, okay, so let me think. No, Rob says it's the Scottish tiger. No, this is my mom's cat. Next time I live stream, I'll show you Templeton. He is the Scottish tiger. That cat is 23 pounds. He is massive. And I am constantly on Travis to feed that cat less because he's huge. And yeah, he's a little beefcake. So I always tell Travis, I'm like, you've got to stop. You're enabling that cat. You've got to stop feeding him all these temptations, or we're going to have to start a TV show. It's called My 23-Pound Life with this, giant cat and everything he goes through. It's ridiculous. Anyhow, sorry. Rabbit hole number 2. So, okay. So rabbit hole number 1 is the discovery of not everybody is like us. And like, what does this mean? Rabbit hole number 2 is, I would say, starting to realize connecting more of the dots and realizing that it's not just the people or the relationship that caused us to start seeking out answers was not the only one. And then we start seeing a fuller picture. So it's very common in that rabbit hole 1 for people, again, they start carving up the world. This is our brain. This is how the human brain works. It's always linking up cause and effect. And a lot of times it'll link up incorrect cause and effect and not even realize it. So some really common pitfalls in that stage 1 rabbit hole is where people start, oh, I'm never going to date. I'm done with women. Right? Or I'm done with men, or I'm never dating a redhead again, or I'm never dating a Scorpio again, or they just start trying to keep themselves safe. And so they start avoiding people that have caused what they think had caused them pain in the past. But that's not correct. And so rabbit hole number 2 is seeing that fuller picture of, oh my goodness, actually, I've had a handful of people like this in my life, maybe never to the extent of the relationship that brought me here, but maybe it was a coworker, maybe it was a parent, maybe it was a friend, maybe it was a neighbor, it was somebody else. And so then there starts this like, oh my goodness, I'm surrounded by manipulative people. What's wrong? Why am I attracting them? I feel like I'm a lightning rod for narcissists. What's going on? And then kind of I'll have to, that book is being edited really as we speak. My mother is hard at work editing my book, and then I'll have it re-edited by another editor, but she's very, very good. Anyways, so she's working on it right now, but when it's done, I'll either post that section or we can go through it on a live stream. Because that part where people start seeing the bigger picture is where the magic really starts to happen. So it's stepping into understanding like your boundaries, your standards, your deal breakers, realizing that a lot of the roadmap that you had for how the world works and for how we're supposed to interact with people was really dysfunctional. And it's anybody, I think everybody, frankly, is kind of born into that understanding of, my book, Out of the Fog, is all about that. It's all about comparing and contrasting these different dysfunctional thinking to its more healthy counterpart. So it's the difference between, love bombing and love. It's the difference between commitment and codependency. There's so many comparisons, probably 50 or so comparisons made. The difference between trauma bonds and healthy bonds. The difference between an apology and somebody acting the part. all of these things, the difference between forgiveness is in there. I forget what I compared that to. Forgiveness and I don't know, forgiveness, maybe acceptance, or I don't remember. The difference between sincerity and intensity. So any one of these things can get a person, it's back into the fog, back into that game of manipulation. So that book is geared towards people that are kind of at maybe stage 1, stage 2, where they're starting to see, to try to understand, like, what is this, and then trying to get out of that. I call it well-intended bad advice, because there's a lot of it floating around out there. The difference between a relationship issue and an individual issue is also in there. And so then kind of towards the tail end of that stage 2 rabbit hole, it's regaining that power and control in your life. So it's shifting from this external locus of control to the internal locus of control. So an external locus of control is when a person feels helpless, that life is happening to them, that they just attract narcissists, and they have no control over that. And an internal locus of control is where a person realizes, you know what, I attract who I attract, but it's up to me how long they stay in my life. So it's regaining their power. And then it's just it's practicing a lot of this stuff on a regular basis. And that's where it's really, really, really cool. It's just absolutely life-changing kind of thing. That's a great question. Kiara says, Dana, how do we not bottle up our feelings when others overstep our boundaries and speak our truth? And how do we stop fearing people's anger and not just being afraid of people's reactions? Kitty, where are you? Well, what? Well, come on up. Come here. Come here. Come here. I love you. I love you, Mr. Kitty. Okay. So how do we not bottle up our feelings when others overstep our boundaries? That takes a lot of practice. And you might find that at first you kind of default into whatever. Well, what do you want? Into your mode, like your friend mode. You might default into fight mode or flight mode. I think for most of us, it's flight mode or freeze, or sometimes friend, where we just kind of ingratiate ourselves, trying to keep the peace. So I guess figuring out kind of what mode you fall into, it takes practice being assertive. And so that's how we get around not bottling up our feelings, is when we start being assertive. And it might be where if you're so caught off guard by a boundary violation that you're not okay with addressing it, which is very common because this stuff takes practice. It might be something that you address it down the road when you're able to compose yourself. So for example, for me, I tend to go into freeze mode. And if it's a boundary violation that, I guess it depends on the depth of the comment, but in the person who it's coming from. But sometimes it just tears spring to my eyes, and I don't want to start crying because I if I want to address the issue, I don't want the other person to feel like I'm being manipulative, or to feel sorry for me. I don't want my tears to derail the conversation that needs to be had. And so I realize if I'm close to the point where I'm crying, I just need to take a step back, and then we can have this conversation when I can regain my composure, because I don't want to get to the point where I'm crying, or, I'm yelling, or I just, I'm bringing up all these other issues because I'm hurt, and now I'm just in reactive mode. So it takes lots of practice. It really, really does. And this is something, I don't do perfectly either. But I'm getting better. I'm getting better at doing it more often than not. Uh, and I think you will find that you do too. How do we stop fearing people's anger and just not being afraid of people's reactions? I think with that part, um, often, well, I think it depends on what kind of anger we're talking about. If you're talking about an ex or a person that's scary, that could literally potentially hurt you, um, I would say listen to that, and that anger might be anger that you really do need to fear. But if it's anger at, let's say, maybe your boss, or a friend, or somebody that you have an issue with, but that's not going to hurt you emotionally or physically, um, I think it can help to realize in those moments where we're uncomfortable with confrontation, or we're fearing somebody potentially getting mad at us, a lot of that stuff, Pia Melody would probably say that a lot of that stuff's coming from that wounded child place within us. And if you remember, she had brilliantly kind of separated these different sides of ourselves out. She had one that was the wounded child, she had one that was the critical parent, and then one that was the functional adult. And it, to me, I just think that is so fascinating, and she is so spot on about that. So that wounded child is the one where if somebody gets mad at us, we get really scared, and we don't like confrontation, and we take, the wounded child is oftentimes lacking kind of that filter. We tend to take everything deeply personal. So if somebody says something mean to us, we take it as absolute truth. There is no kind of healthy boundary there. Whereas as the functional adult, for example, if somebody were to say something mean, or they were to get mad at us, the functional adult would realize that's their stuff. I can leave. I'm not going to sit here and be yelled at. I'm not going to sit here and be intimidated. I'm not going to put up with this. Um, I'm not going to own it. I'm not going to feel guilty about their behavior. I'm not going to feel ashamed for their behavior. I'm not going to let them intimidate me. And if they walk away, then so be it, because who needs, I don't need people like that in my life. So either we can have an adult discussion, because everybody gets frustrated, everybody gets angry, everybody gets hurt feelings. It's how we handle that makes the difference. So if they can have these, if you can have an adult conversation, basically, then the people in your life that can meet you at that level, as that they're meeting you at that place of the functional adult, that's when you have that open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication. And when conflict does come up, it gets resolved a lot sooner. It's not, there's not a lot of that either aggressive or passive aggressive behavior. And when conflict does come up, then in both people are being authentic with what's going on with them, and all of that, that conflict, once it's resolved, it can actually create a deepening of that relationship, because you're actually working through things, because nobody knows where anybody else's boundaries are, right? Unless we let them know. And so if a person accidentally steps on, now this is very different than a person being hateful or being really operating from a place of that wounded child. Because if they're in that wounded child mode and we're trying to be in that functional adult mode, there's a mismatch there. And that's really, it's impossible to work with, because you're not dealing with another functional adult. And a lot of narcissists, as we all know, it's incredibly immature behavior. Healthy adults don't behave like, adults in general, even dysfunctional adults don't behave like this. It's so immature that you're not dealing with an adult, you're dealing with a really, you know, a really damaged child in an adult body. And, it's next to impossible to work with that. So I think if you have a more, an empowered sense of being that functional adult, it's so much easier. And it's really fascinating if you can start watching. This is, I would say, this level 3 rabbit hole kind of stuff. And again, this takes practice too, but if you can start observing this stuff when it comes up within you. So even if you're around conflict among other people, to start paying attention to what's surfacing within you, and then asking yourself, who who is in me right now? Is it the wounded child? Is it the functional adult? Or is it the critical parent? The critical parent comes out as the, oh, well, you know what you should do when, well, da 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 da, you know, and they just they're just critical and they criticize, and it's not helpful. The functional adult is the one that's solutions oriented. The critical parent one is just shaming and blaming and shoulding all over you, you know. So try that. I will be curious to see what kind of insights you gain from that. Let's see here. Jessica says, question, are you going to finish the Codependency series? I need to. It is on my list of things to do. I hit a wall about 2.5 years ago that makes no sense, really, where I have a tremendous amount of anxiety doing recorded videos. And I know that might seem really strange considering I do live streams a couple times a week, but going live, I just hit a button and it's like jumping off the diving board. Like you just have to I just do it and there's nothing else. With a recorded video, I I get so anxious and so critical of everything, like what I'm saying and all of that, that I don't know. It's frustrating for me because I do want to finish these series. I have a lot of my videos that I want to remake, and I just haven't been able to bring myself to do them. So I apologize for that. It is on my list of things to do. We'll see. Hopefully 2019 I can just figure that out and get on with it. It's frustrating. I get comments every single, oh, let me just tell you guys real quick. I am so okay. My early videos, like the first 100 or so videos that I did, I spoke about narcissists from a female perspective and basically from my experience as a domestic violence advocate and as a woman who'd been there, done that. And it I didn't speak about men and what they went through, not as a way to invalidate them, but I had no experience with it. And so it didn't feel appropriate for me to give voice to that. And the unintended consequence of that was that I had a lot of men that were deeply hurt. And I was getting a lot of comments like, well, women are narcissists too. And, a lot of guys are really upset. Totally get it. I don't blame them. Then I heard, there was one guy, and I forget who it was, had sent me this message, and um, I decided, okay, I am going to go through. I can't re-record all of these videos anytime soon, but I can go through and I can add these like annotations onto all of my videos. I went through one by one because I did not know that there was a bulk editing tool out there for YouTube videos. Went through one by one and edited all of these videos with this little disclaimer that I meant to be all inclusive and please know, da, da, da. And then that was great for, I don't know, a handful of months, and then YouTube updated something and they dropped annotations, and so they're no longer on any videos. So all of that work was out the window. And so now I'm getting all these comments, from people that are just upset. And so I'm planning on keeping my old videos because I know a lot of people, they've helped a lot of people, but I'm also going to make new ones that are more just inclusive and then have a link to those, the new videos on the old videos. So lots of things, things I need to do in 2019. Okay, let's see. Russell says, is there any way to know if I turned into a narcissist? Well, Russell, that is an interesting question. And he says, did any of you become a narcissist? So let's talk about this a little bit. It's very common for people to go through trauma. Trauma can make a person become very self-absorbed, for lack of a better word. You're very oriented on your pain and what's going on in your life. It's sort of like if you stepped on a nail and all you can think about is your foot and how bad it hurts and that there's a nail in your foot, and it's all you talk about and it's all you're focused on, and it's hard to even hear to interact with other people because you're so focused on this nail that's in your foot. Does that make sense? It's the same thing for emotional pain too. And so when a person's going through any emotional pain, it's the death of a loved one, a divorce, a job loss, especially abuse of any kind, it can make them to where they just feel profoundly different, and they're so focused on their pain that they have a hard time being there for other people. And not only that, but a person can become so filled with anger and rage, and they want to isolate, and they don't want to date, and they notice a very kind of marked personality difference within themselves. And a lot of, I know I wondered that, of, oh my goodness, I feel profoundly broken. I just, um, how much did this really change me as a person? It's, it's sort of like, you stare into the darkness long enough, it starts staring back at you, kind of a thing. And that's a terrifying place. But I will say, so that's very normal for you to question that and for you to feel that way. A lot of that's part of, it's very common for people to develop what's known as complex post-traumatic stress disorder from an abusive relationship of any kind. And a lot of what you're describing, that tends to be these CPTSD symptoms. They do tend to, with time and with validation and with understanding, they do. And if you can find a good therapist and good treatment for it, it can really help to resolve itself. Um, but after a person goes through something like this, I always tell people, it's never about going back to who we were. It's always about growth, and growth is always about moving forward. So yes, we are different, but that doesn't mean that we have to be less than we were before. It just means that we're different and that we have to rediscover a new normal. But again, that doesn't mean that our new normal has to somehow be a broken sense of normal. It's really anything that we decide to make it. And um, so I always encourage people, if you've heard this before, kind of these different steps. The first one being, you make the decision right now that what happened to you, that you're not going to let this end your life. So taking suicide off the table, just not even an option. Don't let your brain go there. The next step in that is deciding that you're not going to let this ruin your life, even if you don't know how to not have that happen. Because if you're feeling like your life is ruined right now, I get it, and I've been there. But just deciding, what, this is where I'm at right now. This pain, this rebuilding, this is temporary, and I still have a lot of life ahead of me, and it doesn't have to ruin my life. So that's the second thing, deciding not to let this ruin your life. The third thing is deciding to take what happened to you and use it for your highest and greatest good. And so this is, we were talking about these different rabbit holes that people go down. This is kind of more the rabbit hole number 2 or rabbit hole number 3, where we start turning inward and realizing, oh my goodness, we have so much power over so much in our life. How we perceive events is a huge one, and what we do with it is a huge one. So using what happened to you for your highest and greatest good. And we can get into that here in a little bit. And then the fourth one is using what happened to you for not only your highest and greatest good, but for the highest and greatest good of others. That might be your children. It might be people in the community. It might be your friends. It might be whoever it might be. Different people go about that in different ways. But using what happened to you for your highest and greatest good means basically, when your life is blown to pieces, the benefit in that is that you get to choose which pieces you rebuild your life with. There's tremendous power in that. And so you can most people don't have and I know this might sound uh, just wild to even to hear from a person. There's so much benefit in having your life blown to pieces. Most normal people don't have that happen to them. And so as a result, they just kind of there's not a their kind of arc of personal growth isn't really there. It's pretty stagnant. They just kind of chug along. For us that have had our lives blown apart, there's a thing called post-traumatic growth, and it's just tremendous amounts of growth, personal growth that can happen on the other side of trauma. It only happens on the other side of trauma. Um, it can, and you have to really steer into it. You really have to make that declaration of, I'm not going to let this ruin my life. And so then realizing, okay, now what? And that darkness, it can feel all consuming, but some of the things that I did, uh, was deciding, okay, I'm just going to take all of this anger and this hurt, and I'm going to use it as rocket fuel. And I'm going to use this energy to get more organized, to write a book, to, just do all kinds of things. Some people get into like really fantastic shape, or they, they just start doing things that they never would have done before. My brother was in a relationship years ago with this girl who was absolutely awful and cheated on him all the time. And she was awful. And he was devastated, and he had been chugging along through life, kind of living that good enough life. And afterwards, he'd always wanted to be a personal trainer, and, but had doubted his ability to do that. And just, people had always told him, oh, you'll never make money from doing that. And, you just basically don't even try. And after their relationship ended, I don't know if I don't remember who broke up with who, but after that ended, he didn't care anymore. And he was at such a low place. He just thought, well, forget it. I might as well just go do that. And so he did. He quit his job and he took the test and passed. And he's now a personal trainer, and he's really successful at it. None of that would have been possible had she not cheated on him. So like what I was saying earlier, it's the event. Life is full of events, and it's not so much the events in our life that shape us. It's more of how we perceive the events in our life that shape us. And we have control over how we perceive a lot of this, and then the action that we take. So, you know, uh, here's another example. A lot of children, let's say a child, let's say a boy grows up with an abusive parent, mother or father. This child can go either one of two ways, right? They can become abusive themselves. I should say any male or female, okay, it doesn't matter. The child can either become abusive themselves, or they can go the other way and tend to have a lot more compassion for the suffering of others because they've been there. So much of this is within your control of how you perceive things and the action that you take on it. So that's that. The other part of what I wanted to say is the fact that you're even questioning it. A true narcissist would not. That's part of the disorder. Narcissists they're immature. They lack that real ability for introspection, and they don't care. They don't think anything is wrong with them. There's no desire to change anything. There's no concern of, oh my goodness, what if I'm a narcissist? They don't care. In their mind, they're perfect. Everybody else has the problem. It's the mind of a really bratty 3-year-old. There's no real depth there. So the fact that you're questioning it is points to most likely you are talking about a person that's been deeply traumatized, and you're feeling a lot of feelings and you're working through them. And like I said, it's normal to shut down. It's normal to just feel like you're not able to attach to other people, and to just feel numb. And all of those feelings, that's very normal. It's a kind of a part of it, and it's part of working through all of this. Oh, good for you. Buzz says, I can only tell you what seems to be working for me, which was to take up a sport and join a local sports league. It was on my bucket list and has been life changing. Yes, I love that. I love that. And that is so powerful. And it regaining control over your life is really healing and very therapeutic. I just can't express that enough. Even if you go and you clean out a junk drawer, anything that's positive, bringing as much of that positivity, much of that lightness into the darkness, it helps tremendously. Of in just deciding, like, I'm not going to let this sink me. So I'm going to get busy swimming. And this is how I'm going to get busy swimming. I'm going to go join the sports league. I'm going to go clean out a junk drawer. I'm going to go wash my car. I'm going to go walk my dog. I'm going to go do 25 sit ups. I'm going to go do all of this positivity because the best revenge is a good life. And damn it, you deserve it. And you can make it happen. This other person, you know, all of everything that happened to you, this can be used as rocket fuel, and you can transmute. I think of it kind of like a emotional alchemy. You can transmute all of this pain into something outrageously positive and take your life, just catapult it to the next level. You really, really can. I like that, Rob. That's a great way of saying that. He says, if you've been abused by a parent, my stuff has been working through their psychopathic traits, throwing out the wounded child survival toolkit and making it into an adult one. That is, you just said that so perfectly. That's exactly what it is. And, uh, it's exciting when we can start doing that because it just radically changes your life. So good for you. I think that's huge. Let's see here. I mean, yes. And Della says you can get narcissistic fleas, but they're not permanent. And so for those of you that are new here, that narcissistic fleas are, it kind of comes from the saying, when you lie down with a dog, you get fleas. When you're around kind of bad company, you pick up bad habits, basically. And a lot of times for targets of abuse, a lot of the maladaptive, we'll say maladaptive habits they pick up tend to be coping strategies for surviving either an abusive family or an abusive marriage or an abusive work situation or anything that's abusive. And it's amazing the ways in which we can start to kind of cope in maladaptive ways. So, for example, it might be that we start eating too much or drinking or sleeping or spending money, or it could also be personality things where we become very passive or very ingratiating, or we might become very reactive. So we're used to, if you, let's say you grow up in abuse or you were in an abusive marriage and the way that everybody communicated was through yelling, then that kind of stuff is normal. Then you're going to take that with you potentially. And you're like, oh my goodness. And it takes a while. Then you kind of realize, oh my goodness, I don't need to yell. I don't need to cuss. I don't need to, you know, um, stomp out the door. There's other ways of behaving that are more effective. So that's, very eye opening when we start kind of examining, because here's the thing, we all are our own baseline for normal. So it's very difficult for any one of us to see these things, these maladaptive behaviors within ourselves. It tends to be, we have to either hit some sort of rock bottom, or our behavior, somebody says, hey, you know what, I'm not going to be yelled at, or I'm not going to be talked to like that, or I don't do silent treatment. Somebody's going to call you out on it, or uh, you possibly have somebody that you trust that can point this kind of stuff out to you, or maybe you're doing research, like, learning about all of this. And you start seeing things within yourself, and you're reading books, or you're watching these videos, and you're like, oh, yikes, I do that. Ugh, what does this mean? So that's very normal. I would be concerned about a person who didn't watch all of these videos about narcissism or manipulation or problematic behavior. If a person sat through all of my videos, or I don't know, anybody else's on YouTube, any of their videos, and they didn't see anything in themselves, that would be concerning. It's very common for people to start seeing, like, oh, yikes, you know what, I've done that too. Or um, the love bombing. A lot of us on the other side of the spectrum, not only would we fall into love bombing, but we might have been really ingratiating. That was our way of getting kind of interacting with people, because maybe we grew up in a home that there was a lot of yelling and screaming. And so to kind of navigate that environment, we had to become very kind of placating and ingratiating. And uh, it's just fascinating. This stuff just goes on and on. Like, the rabbit hole that this can go down is just so interesting. If you've heard the term empath, where a person is kind of highly sensitive to the emotions of other people, a lot, I frankly, I would say 99%, if not 100% of the time, that comes from being around some sort of abusive environment, where you're so in tune with the emotional climate in a room. Like, you walk in and you know immediately there's tension there, and we want to be the ones, we take it on. And so we might leave the room uh, feeling the emotions that were in the room. We might feel angry or sad or whatever, and we don't even realize it. And uh, it's very disorienting, because then you can't really figure out, like, what emotions are mine and what emotions are somebody else's. So it's just interesting, the ripple effect to all of this. So yeah, but learning the fleas, the problematic behaviors that you might have, and it's definitely worth kind of going through and examining. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll down here. Interesting. Anne says, I learned that yelling, etc., would actually head off a true escalation, and I was physically safer if I gave him the drama immediately. But I despise having gained, like, Jerry Springer type style coping skills. Yes. So that's here's another way that this kind of stuff comes out is, let's say you're married, or you're dating somebody, or you've just got a person, whoever, the problematic person in your life, okay? And you realize, man, this person is basically dramatic, erratic, and emotional. They give the silent treatment out of the blue. They escalate really fast. They run hot and cold. Their behavior is very erratic, or it's very dramatic. They've always got to stir the pot. They've got to be the center of attention. They make a mountain out of a molehill. They just they're just drama, and they're difficult to be around. It's just exhausting. Their behavior is really emotional. They start crying, they start yelling, they start slamming doors. It's just all of this kind of stuff. For a lot of people that have been on the receiving end of, I kind of call this stuff intensity, or other forms of intensity, tend to be, these really awful breakups, and then these really over the top makeups. So it's just this cycle of intensity. For a person, for getting out of a relationship like that, a healthy relationship can feel really flat, and it can feel boring. Um, and it can feel like something's missing. So if we've been so used to just that level of intensity, that over the top kind of stuff, that can be hard to break. That takes a lot of practice of seeing that this is problematic. The person that's calling you at your work, leaving, notes on your car, they're texting you dozens of times, they're creating fake accounts to text you, they're so persistent, that can very easily be mistaken for caring. And you add that kind of stuff in with all, the fighting and the abuse, and it's so much. And yeah, so that's really insightful, Anne, that if he's looking for that drama, giving that to him. And I guess that would be the opposite of gray rock, because with gray rock, we would say to just say, to be no drama and be totally unreactive. But here's the thing. I always encourage people, it's important, only you have the context of your situation. So what might work in one situation might not work in another. And I think that's a great example of that. So if, feeding into that drama, and it's like it's just so dysfunctional, right? Feeding into that drama and then realizing, okay, that's going to cause a blow up, but at least it's heading off a bigger one. Uh, then I think you got to do what you got to do. Oh, good, Rob. I'm glad that helped. He says, you helped me so much with the advice about empty buckets, the intensity in trying to not miss that. Yes. That's a big thing for a lot of people, especially, when people don't know that it was emotionally or psychologically abusive. This is, I mean, this level of intensity, this is the stuff that songs are written about. This is the premise of pretty much every romantic comedy. This is, it's just plays and this sense of idealized love. And it's wrong. This isn't love. Love doesn't drive a person to murder or to feel anxious and depressed and suicidal and you can't sleep, you can't eat. It shouldn't be like that. It's not like that. That's not love. Like, that's trauma bonds. That's somebody pulling your strings. That's love is safe, it's secure, it's reliable, it's appreciation, it's value, it's caring. They say love is an action. It's a verb. Love is a verb. And it's so true. Love is action. It's not these grandiose, over the top, sweeping gestures. And then it's followed by a bunch of bad behavior. Like, that's not love. That's, the merry-go-round from hell is what that is. Okay. Hi, Agata is here. Siddharth says, hey, where's your red cup? I am on vacation. So I don't have it. I have just a plain old glass. Next week, I will have my red bowl of tea. I'm very looking forward to it. Tom says, hi, Dana. What is the most effective way to protect myself from shouting and passive aggressive behavior when in the company of my dad's narcissistic partner? Well, I would say in the short term, it's going to be buying time. So getting out of there. So if you can go excuse yourself to the bathroom, if you can go in the other room, if you can get on your phone and go check your email, doing something to give you a break and just getting away, a breather, just getting out of that space. Taking time, a few minutes, regrouping before you go back in, and then realizing you don't have control over this. You don't have control over your dad. You don't have control over his partner. You don't have control over their relationship. All you have control over is yourself. And this is their dynamic. It's like, Lucy and Charlie Brown with the football. It's crazy making for anybody else who's watching that. It's the cycle over and over and over again, right? Charlie Brown holds the football, Lucy holds the football, Charlie Brown runs up to kick it, she pulls the ball away. To everybody else that's watching this, we're like, this is absolutely maddening. This is so frustrating. Why doesn't Charlie Brown just leave or say something? Or, and you just want to yell at him, like, Charlie Brown, come on, do something different. And she's mean. Don't play with her anymore. But that's just their dynamic. And I think fully realizing that this is their dynamic and this is something that you don't have control over. When you fully realize that, it takes so much of the the, I guess, the burden or the anger away, because there's it is what it is, you know? And so, and I think seeing, it's interesting too when you're around, knowing what you know now, right? Like watching a lot of these videos, learning about manipulation, all of this stuff. When we're around other people that are in this dynamic, it can be so interesting to kind of sit back and just watch it unfold and watch what surfaces within you. That's the more, I think, the more telling part. So I don't know if you're into journaling or doing voice memos on your phone, but this is some gold here that you can really use towards your personal growth. Uh, so as you're watching the stuff surface within you, like what's going on? Is it frustrating you? Is it reminding you of, what is it reminding you of? What is it kind of triggering within you? Um, Slowing things down. Are you able to actually, leave the room, excuse yourself? What coping strategies did you implement? What worked? What didn't work, and why? And it's interesting the stuff that can come up, and it's interesting too when you catch yourself, because let's say, for example, you're around them for the holiday and you're there for a week and you do fine. There's maybe 10 instances in a week's period of time, right? And let's say you do, well, let's say maybe in a day. uh, let's say you do fine for 8 of them, but then 2, you're caught off guard by your own reaction of, wow, I can't believe I lost my cool, or uh, I jumped in to defend my dad. This kind of stuff. This is the stuff that's important for you to examine of what was going on at that point. And and 2, so there's a lot of different things that you can do too. If this is their dynamic and it's absolutely crazy making for you, and uh, you're not at the place where it's just causing you so much mental anguish and it's raising your blood pressure and it's just so awful, then that's some of the things that you can do is start spending less time. So let's say if you go and stay with them for a week, maybe next time you go and you stay with them for 3 days, or maybe you stay for 3 days, but you stay at a hotel. Or maybe if you stay there for 3 days, you really make sure to, you start going to bed at 9:30. Do you know what I mean? And then you don't get out of bed till 9:30. Like you're doing what you need to do in order to keep your sanity and to make this as enjoyable as possible. So again, this stuff is gold because you can learn so much about yourself. And when you start making your sanity a priority, it's really interesting because this stuff has ripple effects, because it's not just your dad and his partner. This is the way that you're engaging with everybody, with your significant others, with your friends, with people, your coworkers. This skill set is just, it's so powerful, and it's universal. It just applies throughout your life. Okay. Let's see. Let me scroll. Selena says, do narcissists attract other narcissists? Do they congregate together? Generally, no, because with narcissists, it's only them. Uh, if you ever, I don't know, this is going to date me, but if you ever watched the show Highlander that was on TV, like, I don't know, back in like the early 90s, and the Highlander would go around, Duncan MacLeod, he would go around, he's like, there could be only one. And, you have to go around beheading all of these other Highlanders so they could have the only one left would have all the power. Narcissists are very much like that. So if you've got, the number one, and this person in their mind, like, the number one peacock is all of the attention, and everything's got to go to them. There's not a lot of room for anybody else. And so if you have these strong personalities, difficult personalities, uh, they don't tend to mesh well. So, but if they are, every dynamic is different. When you kind of, and there's different degrees, right? So let's say if you did have a bunch of narcissists or sociopaths in a room, uh, it's it's sort of like having a bunch of snakes. Like if you have like a black mamba and a rattlesnake and I don't know, an anaconda and a viper, all of these different snakes, it's sort of like who's going to win? And there can be only one. So it's whichever snake is going to win out. So they kind of create their own hierarchy within that environment. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. But normally, no, they don't tend to seek each other out. If they do, they just normally don't. It's normally more predatory behavior. They tend to seek out people that where they can get their ego fed and that people that they can manipulate. Steve says, I love your channel, Dana. I'm on the verge of divorce. I believe my wife is crazy making. I can never win or understand. It's bad. It's a long time coming. Been yelling and silent treatment for months. I'm nervous. Yes. Well, I think it's great that you've identified. I think it can help just to have that word, right? To understand that, oh, crazy making. Oh, that's really a thing. Okay, good. Because that's exactly how I was feeling. To be able to label something is so powerful within itself. And um, at this point, it's really going to be about getting peace in your life as much as possible. Like we were just talking about with the other guy and his dynamic with his father. It might mean, you start going to bed early. It might mean, um, you watching TV. It's just kind of detaching and doing your own thing and carving out peace in your life, taking really long showers, uh, just, I don't know, going to the bathroom and being in there for as long as, as long as you can be, really, to where it's to try to limit the amount of crazy making in your life. You're just trying to carve out peace in your life. Yes. Taldenum says, one amazing thing. Oh, that's what I was going to go grab. I knew I was forgetting something. One amazing thing is that when they are projecting, they are telling us about themselves. That's how I concluded the person in my case was likely disordered. Yes, that's a really weird thing when you're on the receiving end of this, when they start accusing you of doing things that you're not doing, and none of your behavior has ever pointed to that, where they start, in my case, the first narcissist I was with, towards the tail end, um, he started going through my laundry and was convinced that I was cheating on him. And I thought he was joking at first because it was so out of the blue. I'm like, where do I go? Like, we spend all this time together. I'm either at work or I'm with you, and we lived out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it was just so strange. And then later on, I found out that he was cheating and had been cheating since day one. It was just so strange. So that kind of stuff. If people, the book, it's downstairs. I it was a Bill Cosby book. He wrote back in I think the 80s called Time Flies, and on the back of it he has a section about immorality, and it's eerie, kind of knowing what we know about him now. But he talks about something about um, immorality, like somebody's got to go first, so it might as well be him. I'll get the book tomorrow for when we go for a book club. I'll read you guys that section. It's really creepy when you kind of see, oh, he was warning us about him. Uh, when people start, Chris Watts, as another example, Chris Watts had sent his wife a picture of a Barbie doll covered with a Kleenex, like she was dead. And she had posted that on Facebook. This was about, I don't know, a few days before he murdered her. She had posted this on Facebook saying, like, I'm not sure what to make of this. Like, this is really strange. So this kind of behavior, if somebody starts talking about, oh, I had a weird dream about you, I dreamt that you died, I'm concerned that you might disappear, or if they're hinting at it, oh, sure would be a terrible thing if something were to happen to you, kind of this feeling, you're like, that feels like a threat. That kind of stuff, they start accusing you of being out to get them, of trying to sabotage them. That's, I would be very careful, because odds are it's in their mind, they're thinking about it and they're projecting it onto you. Scary stuff. Okay, let's see. Hey, Kevin. Let me scroll. Oh my gosh. Rob says, I can't, Kitty, what can I help you with? Huh? Hold on a second. Come here. Well, come here. Come here. I love you. Come here. Come here. I don't, up, down, up, down. Rob says, I can't help imagining that with a small giggle, a club of narcissists. But exactly, it would be a room of one-way competitions to whose could be the most amazing. Oh my gosh, it would just suck the air right out of the room. It would just be awful. It would be absolutely awful. Did you ever see, this is obscure. Did anybody ever see, there was a show on, I think it was some, I want to say Spike TV. It was this game show called Solitary. And I loved it. I don't know if anybody even watched the show besides me. It was so interesting. They had different people, and then there's like, I don't know, 10 contestants or so, and they were each in these tiny rooms, like 6x6 rooms, and they weren't allowed to see any of the other contestants. And they would have them each do these challenges. And they were it was fascinating. So some were physical challenges. Some were mental. One of them was, so it just reminded me of that, like some obscure challenge of being in a room full of narcissists and like who's going to tap out first because they just can't handle it. But one of the episodes, they would have people sit on, here's one. They would keep them awake for like 24, 26 hours. And then they would have to start memorizing and then reciting this poem. And then it was whoever did it the fastest or the first would win that challenge. It was just interesting that what humans, where our limits are. They had one where it was eating cookies, and it was Oreo cookies. And I was like, oh man, I would totally win that. Like hands down. But it was so interesting because there was this gal on there and she was a marathon runner. And the challenge was you eat a cookie and then drink like half a cup of milk. I think she ate 3 cookies and she just began crying, and she tapped out. She's like, I quit. I can't do this. She's like, I spend so much time training and eating clean. I can't do this. And so that was her breaking point. It was just interesting show. Maybe they have it on Netflix or something now. I would totally, if they had, they have all these escape rooms now, and that's a big thing. I've never done one, but I think it would be a lot of fun. I think it would be so fun to have some sort of room where people went under like these different mental and physical challenges like that, just to see. Because the cool thing too was this game show. At the end of it, the prize was like $10,000, so it wasn't a huge prize. And pretty much every single contestant after they left the show, they were crying. And they're like, this show changed my life. Like I didn't realize what I was capable of, and I didn't realize where my breaking points were until this show. And every single one of them had just this tremendous amount of insight that they gained. It was cool. Yeah, EK says, I wish 3 cookies would break me. I would knock out a bag of Oreos. I know, that's totally how I felt. I was like, man, I would smoke that one. I would totally win. That's probably what it is. Up Yours Narc says the kitty doesn't know who Dana is talking to, and he keeps checking on her. That makes total sense because he doesn't normally do that. And I bet you're right. I bet that's what it is. Rob says escape rooms sound really challenging on lots of levels. Yeah, there's one, I was trying to get Travis to go with me. But it was based on, it was a horror one. They had 2. One was for people like me that can't do horror. So it was like Pirates of the Caribbean, and it was more kid themed. I still think it'd be fun. But then they had one that was based on the movie The Saw, and they even had actors, and it sounded absolutely terrifying. And but we would that one had, you could do it with 4 people, whereas the other one we would had to have found like 8. And so I was trying to figure out if I could actually do the Saw one, and I finally was like, no, I'm not. I would flip out. I become so unpredictable when I get that scared that I have become violent before, and I can't control it. I just absolutely flip out. And so I don't want to go to jail. So I don't want, and I don't want to hurt anybody. So I don't want to do that one. Uh, huh. I don't know, Elizabeth. That's an interesting question. She says, is there a word for the opposite of smear campaign? Like that video by Kevin, Let Me Be Frank. Gosh, I don't know. Does anybody know of a word? The only thing that comes to mind would be love bombing, but that's more, a lot of attention and affection and flattery. But are you talking like really talking up another person to other people, but it's still insincere and not true? I'll be curious to hear what you say. A Mind for Life says, Dana, have you seen that codependent people tend to project their ideals onto narcissists? Yes. And Pia Melody discussed this in the book. I believe it was Facing Love Addiction. And I think she was really spot on about this. So she had said that for a lot of people that were codependent, and basically what we're talking about when we're talking about codependence is a person that is looking to be completed. Like we're looking for somebody else to complete us. And we tend to kind of go in this holding pattern when we're between partners, basically. So, and that's a really watered down version of it, but in a nutshell, that's kind of it. And so so a lot of codependents fall into this love addiction where we are idealizing other people. And it can, of course, as we all know, become very, incendiary when you have that dynamic with an abusive person. So the codependent person has this, she refers to it as this fantasy. So it's this fantasy of this ideal love that finally somebody's going to come into our lives, and this is the wounded child that's really talking, that where somebody's going to come in, they're going to rescue us, and their love is going to be able to kind of squeeze all of our broken pieces together and make us whole. And so we keep having this fantasy, not realizing that it's a fantasy, which is so interesting. But once you're aware of it, you're aware of it. And you're like, oh my goodness, this is what's going on. So when we meet somebody, especially a person who's doing a lot of that love bombing, then in our mind, we're creating this whole narrative of who this other person is. And it's the fantasy, because the reality is we don't know them. Our brain is filling in all of these gaps as to who this person really is. And, generally we're not going to be 100% right, because our brain is just filling in the gaps. And, but if we're taking action, and so Pia Melody also refers to it as codependency. This is harsh, but so just bear with me, because I think she's right in some aspects. The way she worded it can be really harsh and can make a person. If somebody had told me this a couple of years ago, I probably would have physically attacked them. Like I would have been that upset about it. But she refers to codependency as a disease of immaturity. And it's basically caused by a lack of nourishing parenting. So if we didn't get the love and attention and affection that we needed growing up, then it's still that wounded child. It's that level of immaturity where we're trying to get that from other people, and through a wide variety of ways. So, so it's that fantasy when we can catch ourselves of, oh my goodness, I've been projecting this fantasy onto this other person, or I'd been putting my life on hold, waiting for a certain person or whatever. It's very interesting when you start kind of seeing this stuff more for what it is. It's a lot easier once you see insincere behavior for what it is. Um, and how would I put that? Uh, Inaccurate behavior within ourselves of the fantasy. When you can see that you're doing this, and you can, it's like seeing the wizard behind the curtain. It loses the appeal. When you start seeing love bombing as the insincere action that it really is, it stops being appealing. And when you start seeing it as immature, when somebody's coming on full force right out of the gate, when they're, it's the fish jumping in the boat. When somebody's coming on full speed, and they're talking about love and marriage and babies and all of this stuff and moving in together, and you've known them for a month, and they're talking like this, that's immature. And so that can be very eye-opening, because a lot of us can fall into that, because a lot of us are looking for that. Oh, I just want to find somebody that'll love me unconditionally and completely. And so we're willingly jumping into that, mistaking this immaturity for an ideal relationship. And it's not. It's a relationship of immaturity, and it's oftentimes nothing but a nightmare. So yes, but that's a big thing, the projection of ideals. Are you serious? Torstein says scientists have announced a new unit to accurately measure narcissism, number of selfies per hour, N equals S divided by H. That's interesting. And of course, we all know that only measures a certain degree of maybe self-absorption, but there's so much more to true narcissism. It's the lack of empathy, the lack of remorse, the just pathological way in which they interact with the world. It's the way that they rewrite reality. It's the way that there's no accountability. It's gaslighting, it's triangulation, it's projection, it's ridiculously immature behavior, it's bullying. It just goes on and on. It's so much more than, taking a bunch of pictures of yourself. Irina says, well, what if we had the full nourishment, but also had ADHD? I don't know. Here's the thing. I think anybody, because this stuff isn't taught, and it needs to be, it's just right up there. You've got emotional health. It's right up there it needs to be right up there with physical health. This is stuff that really needs to be taught, because it's not taught, and the opposite tends to be taught, right? You've got men that are taught the message of, oh, you need to be a white knight, and this is what you need to rescue, and you need to do all this stuff. And then women are taught you need to be, you're a princess, or you're a damsel in distress. And it's just all these toxic messages, and none of that is going to lead to anything positive. Siddharth, thank you for the live stream donation. He says, hey, Dana, how long did it take to heal from CPTSD and codependency? Are both the same? I have CPTSD, but have or had no codependency. Let's see. I'm sorry. I wanted to read your question so I didn't lose it. Did I answer the previous question? I don't remember. Hold on. Cha. Shoot. What was I saying? Did I answer? Please let me know. If I needed, I feel like I stopped. Oh, it was the ADD. Irony. I don't think that, okay, so because the stuff isn't taught, anybody can fall into it, because when somebody is selling you a dream, there's whatever it might be, they're using your emotions. They're either they're hitting you with fear of missing out, fear of, you better do what they say or else, or it's lust, it's just love bombing, and they come on so strong that really creates that soulmate connection. Um, they're using anger to get some sort of response, pity. There's all kinds of things that, and it just doesn't take a lot to really reel a person in. So I don't think it's so much ADHD as to why a person gets caught in this. It's more of, we have vulnerabilities that we all have vulnerabilities. It's all a part of being human. But these vulnerabilities, if they're not examined, then they can become really problematic. So a lot of times manipulation is most effective when a person has a certain vulnerability. So, for example, let's say a person really wants to sell their car and they need money. They're really in, like, they got to pay rent in 15 days kind of a thing. They're really in a bind. They're trying to sell their car. And let's say they put it on Craigslist and they start getting all these messages back. And a lot of them seem like scams because they have this vulnerability of, I have got to pay rent and I've got to sell my car to help pay rent. They're going to be more prone to falling into these manipulations because they're going to hold on to hope that it's not a scam. We all do this in some way, shape, or form. It's hope dies last. And so if we're really lonely and you've got a total stranger that's love bombing you on Facebook or on dating sites, we want it to be true. But if we weren't in that attitude of scarcity, if we weren't lonely, or if we weren't in a place where we really needed money, we wouldn't be falling for this stuff. So vulnerabilities, it's wild. It really colors our perceptions of reality and changes the actions that we take. So it's important that we see this, we understand our vulnerabilities, and that we also understand what manipulative behavior is. So like I said, anybody can fall into this. I get a lot of people that are like, oh, Dana, I had this Norman Rockwell childhood. It was fantastic. My parents are still married. They're happily married. My dad is this amazing guy. My mom was an amazing woman. I don't understand how this happened to me. And so we start kind of going through, okay, well, what are some of the, what were the early signs of this relationship? Like, what was the hook that had you? And a lot of times it's that love bombing, and they're mistaking that level of intensity for sincerity is what it is. And it's easy to do because normal, decent people don't think that, we tend to assume that other people are also normal and decent, and that our intentions are somebody else's intentions. And, as we all know, that's not always the case. So yeah, it's important for this kind of stuff to be discussed because it's not intuitive, So, okay. So Siddharth, how long did it take to heal from CPTSD? Everybody has their own time frame for this. But I think it's important, and I know you've probably heard me say this before, but with healing, it's really important that we get clear on what we're talking about when we're talking about healing. So, healing is not about going back to the way we were before, because life is always about growth, and growth is always about moving forward. So healing is about creating a new normal. It's sort of like when you, if you got a really bad cut in your arm, on your arm, and it heals, well, it doesn't look like the same it did before. Now it's scar tissue. But that scar tissue is a lot stronger than that skin that was there before. So it's healing. It's just, things are just different now. And again, when the conversation around healing is one of those words that it's so, I think, misunderstood and misconstrued and misapplied that it can create a lot of unnecessary confusion, kind of like the word forgiveness, kind of like the word love, kind of like, a lot of these, really important words. But I think it's really important to be very clear about what we're talking about. So for me, so let's see. healing from CPTSD, if we're talking about the symptoms like the night terrors, the feeling distrusting of others, of wanting to isolate, of having anxiety, being very reactive and having a lot of anger, of feelings of depression, feelings of tearfulness, um, these, like the physical kind of, or I guess physical and emotional kind of symptoms, those tend to settle down with time if you can find a therapist that, or actually there's videos on YouTube. EMDR or EFT tends to work really well with helping a person to process trauma. Um, a lot of times talking it out and getting support in support groups, or with a therapist or a life coach who understands emotional and psychological abuse, can be incredibly helpful. Um, to me, true healing is, it truly is. It's about taking all of the pieces. When a person has PTSD of any kind, it's like you're just blown apart emotionally. And healing that involves putting those pieces back together. But because healing is never about going back to the way we were, we have to put the pieces back in a different way. We will never be able, to put them back the way they were. But that doesn't have to be a bad thing. So we can put them back in a more empowered way. And so for me, true healing from CPTSD involves just squeezing out as much as you possibly can from, um, understanding the world in a radically in more empowered way, of understanding, boundaries and standards and your deal breakers, and getting in tune with your inner self, and figuring out kind of what's nourishing for you and what's toxic for you. And uh, I mean, just being so in tune with yourself. Like, what was it? I think it was Steve, um, or it might have been, I'm sorry, I forget the guy's name, who was talking about going back and seeing family, getting so in tune with yourself that you're able to watch these emotions surface within you. And you kind of realize, Eckhart Tolle would say, you are the watcher behind, you are not the emotions, you are the watcher, the observer behind these emotions. And so kind of developing this level of emotional awareness where this stuff can surface, and you can get to a place where you're not reactive, but you're coming at it from a place of curiosity, and not reactivity, and not judgment. So it's just radically changing the way that you perceive yourself and other people, is to me full healing from CPTSD. Um, there's Now I will tell you, I mean, there's still things about me. Uh, some people would say that I'm hypervigilant. I actually saw, well, what was the movie? Was it Taken? I think it was Taken. I saw that for the first time the other day, probably about a month ago. And the father was, had this background, and I don't know, like, um, I don't know, just safety and security and understanding bad guys, I guess. And his ex-wife had made a comment, because he was saying, oh, for the daughter, he wanted her to call him. He wanted her to be very aware of her surroundings, this, that, and the other. And the mom was like, oh, you're paranoid. And his comment was something like, no, I'm not. I'm just aware. And I thought, that's it. That's it. When you're aware of what's out there in the world, you're some people would call it hypervigilant. I don't. I'm like, I know exactly what's out there. And so I'm not going to argue, because I go about things differently with the way I go about trusting people, there's certain things I just am not going to do because I'm not comfortable doing it. And I guess the point is getting grounded enough in your reality that if other people are trying to push you into doing something that you're not okay with, that you don't even care. Like, whatever, that's you, that's not me. So I think what can help accelerate the healing from CPTSD is, in large part, just awareness of it, that it's a thing and that you're not crazy. And then understanding there's different steps in this healing process. Like I think you were on, I'd mentioned before the last section of the book that I'm currently working on. Um, I have these different stages of healing, and it encompasses a lot of that. So once that book is done, I will either post that as a giant article on my website, or I will go through it in a live stream. So you guys have a more like fleshed out picture of kind of what I firmly believe is a more complete understanding of healing. Codependency. Okay, so CPTSD and codependency are not the same thing. They oftentimes go hand in hand because a lot of codependent people tend to get tangled up with a lot of the wrong people, and they hold on until they can no longer hang on anymore. And that's a problem, and that can lead to CPTSD because a lot of codependent people, so not only are they coming from this place of needing other people to complete them and looking for somebody for this relationship to fix them and to make them feel whole, uh, a lot of times they have a lot of this dysfunctional programming, which again, I would say all of society has it until they learn otherwise, frankly. I think you have to go through some sort of really awful manipulative relationship, whether it's with an addict or a personality disordered person or something, to learn these skills, because normal people don't seek this stuff out. Your life is, you're just chugging along and things are working well enough until they're not. And it's the point when they're not that it's generally some really person with extreme behavior that rattles you when you start doing things different. So healing from codependency, I'd say a lot of the healing, the later stages of it, the boundaries, the standards, the deal breakers, the getting in tune with your inner self, that kind of stuff is pertains to both and is relevant to both. CPTSD, I think some of the bigger things are being grounded enough in your reality and learning to trust people in a very different way, realizing that trust is something that's earned, it's not just given. And whereas I think a lot of normal people tend to take people at face value, and they're very quick to, let down their guard and to open up and either tell a person a bunch of stuff about them, or, to let them into their house, or to give them a ride home, or, just all kinds of stuff. There's no like appropriate level of, I think, self-protection there. So how did Pia Melody, she had a series of things which I thought she listed out really well. It was something like the things that we need to go through to really heal from codependency. It's self-care, self-protection, self-love, self-respect. There might have been more, but that's a good start. So those things, like making yourself a priority in every dynamic that you have, and starting with yourself. So yeah, does that help? Do I need to clarify that? I covered a lot of ground in that. I hope that makes sense. Agata says, Pia says it takes about 3 years to heal from codependency if you do the work. Truth Seeker says, Pia Melody was ahead of her time. I agree. I think that woman is absolutely brilliant. I just love her work so much. I joke all the time that I'm going to get a tattoo of like a heart, with an anchor through it that says Pia on it, because I just think the world of her work. She's fantastic. And I would say that, you'll hear different things from different people about how long it takes to heal from codependency. Some people will say that it's a lifelong thing. And I think in some ways that's true, because it's learning a different way of relating to the world. And when we talk about like doing a quote unquote, doing the work, it's oftentimes, you need certain situations to present themselves for you to be able to do the work. And then it's this whole process of observation of kind of a like post, post-game analysis, really, where you're figuring out like what worked, what didn't work, why did all this go down the way it went down, and really looking at your own behavior from that place of curiosity and not judgment. That can be really hard to do. It can be so easy, and I think natural, to slip into to just being so hard on ourselves of, man, what was I thinking? I cannot believe I did that. I cannot believe I just, instead of being assertive, I just smiled and nodded, and I was being really ingratiating. I cannot, like, what on earth? I thought I was past that. It can be really frustrating when we handle certain situations in ways that we don't want to handle them. So it's these interactions with other people that's really doing the work, is seeing how are we handling this, and are we coming from that place of the functional adult? Are we being assertive? Um, and you just keep practicing it. So it can be overwhelming when people say, "Oh, it's a lifelong process," but I will say there does come a point in it where it really becomes fun, and it becomes fascinating when you realize, "Oh my goodness, there is so much going on with my brain," and it's just so weird. Like, you just see your behavior, and you're like, "Man, this is it's just weird. Like, these were certain patterns that I had that I don't want to have, and where is this coming from?" It's just, there's so much insight into yourself, and uh, it can be really cool. So try to not not get overwhelmed by that. Cheesy Ellen says, "How do you know when you are healed?" And we are going to call it a night here pretty soon, because I'm getting close to losing my voice, and we have book club tomorrow night at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So be there or be square. Let's see. How do you know you're healed? That is a great question. And it's also kind of a big answer. If the person, I would say at a minimum, it's having a healthy understanding of the world and of yourself, making your safety and sanity a priority. What PM Melody was talking about, making your self-care, being self-protective, self-love, self-respect, self-esteem, that kind of stuff, making that top priority. If we're talking about dating and that kind of stuff, um, if to be able to walk away, to be able to see the fantasy that a lot of us have, to be able to see love bombing for what it is, to be able to see immature behavior for what it is, and to be able, you might still feel that pull, because it's still a lot of these vulnerabilities for us tend to go back to childhood, and so that pull can be really strong. But uh, seeing immature behavior in other people and in yourself, um, if you're dating, being able to be assertive, understanding when you've had a boundary that's been crossed, um, understanding when somebody's mistreating you. This is a big thing. Again, this stuff's not taught, and so a lot of people, we're taught the opposite. Oh, giving other people the benefit of the doubt, this continual quote unquote forgiveness, but it's just allowance of bad behavior. Assuming the best in other people. This kind of stuff. It's the fantasy. It's not seeing behavior clearly. It's really important that we see problematic behavior for what it is, and we're able to address it appropriately, not live in la la land where we're just going to hold on to hope that they're going to change, or um, you know, we're doing all of this well-intended bad advice that's being thrown at us, that we're able to see that the garbage for what it is. Um, uh, Understanding when you're being mistreated. So that's a big one. Um, that can take time. I see a lot of people in the support group, and I get it because I've been there too, where they'll post things of, am I being too sensitive with this, or what do you guys think? And And for me, a lot of this is like, whoa, that's some like slow pitch stuff. Like this should be easy, no way kind of stuff. So if a person's yelling at you, if they're name calling, if they're demanding, if they have no respect for your boundaries, this kind of stuff, that's a no go. Like that's just forget it, because that's going to continue, you know? So no abuse of any kind. I would say that's a healthy standard to have. It's a very reasonable standard to have. There's lots of people out there that are not abusive in any way, shape, or form. Um, Being able to walk away from what doesn't nourish you, that's a huge thing. If you're dating, I think it's important if you're dating to not date if you're lonely. So not trying to, if you're if you're looking for friends, but you're dating instead, that kind of thing, that's a problem, because then you're probably not going to make very good decisions in people. Making sure that you have you've built up a support system around you. I'm a big fan of meetup.com for that reason. It's a great way to make new friends and get out there and do fun things. Um, if you are, if you feel that you've gone on a few dates with somebody, if you can think ahead and think, if this person is not interested in me, or if this relationship doesn't work out, if you feel like you're going to be emotionally destroyed by that, or are really set back in your healing, then you haven't fully healed. So it's important that we're able to kind of weather the different storms of rejection, of um, dating is full, it's all about rejection, it's about being picky, you know so, and it can be really difficult to not uh be deeply wounded by that, especially if we really like the person and they don't like us back. So, just making sure that you're not um kind of using that relationship to feel good, because you're kind of maybe inadvertently using this relationship to help you heal, which doesn't work and it's not fair to the other person. I would say that stuff is a good start. Let's see. Yes. Omaluk. I know I'm not saying that right. Omaluk says, my ex was quote unquote nice in a lot of ways, but the pathological lying was not something I could live with. After all, I mean, how can you have a relationship with no trust? And that's just it. You can't. Like there is no relationship if there's not trust. And, of course, when you're dealing with a manipulator who is a pathological liar, they will insist that you should trust them. Well, I apologized. You're living in the past. You need to trust me. Then all of a sudden you're the one with the issue. And the reality is it's healthy and normal to have trust issues with a person who has lying issues. There would be something wrong if we just instantly trusted them. So I see a lot of people that go into therapy, they're trying to fix their relationship because they think they have a trust issue because their partner has been cheating on them or have been stealing money or lying to them. And it's like, no, this isn't your issue. This is their issue. There would be something wrong with you if you didn't have trust issues. You should have trust issues with that kind of behavior. Uh, so, and this can get people I just see this all the time. People get all kinds of tangled up because if you get a person that's spouting off a lot of really well-intended bad advice, and it comes in all packages. It can be friends, family, therapists, spiritual leaders, you name it, that give a lot of that well-intended bad advice, and they'll make that individual issue into a relationship issue of, oh, you need to forgive and forget, oh, you need to commitment is forever, and oh, uh, like on and on. And it's like, it's really important. This is why it's important for us to be clear with our deal breakers, so um so you're not mm, s- getting stuck like that and then just being dragged through hell. And it oftentimes takes a person, because of so much of this well-intended bad advice, and because a normal, decent person's trying to make sense out of problematic behavior. It just doesn't compute for us. And so it's very common for a person to think, well, did I drive them to cheat on me? Did I drive? Is there some sort of communication breakdown in our relationship? Is that why they're lying? Do they have these deep seated issues from childhood? Do they not feel that they can open up to me? We're trying to make sense out of all of this. And at the end of the day, none of that even matters. What matters is, what kind of behavior are we experiencing, and are we okay with it? Like, where are our deal breakers with that? Because that is the pathological lying. It's absolutely relationship busting behavior, because you don't never know if they're telling the truth. Oh gosh. S. Edwards says, the narcissist I married told me so many times that I should go ahead and kill myself. He sat there and waited. And this is stuff, you know, when a person's in it, and a lot of other people too, they don't understand. If you're not on the receiving end of that kind of stuff, it might not seem as abusive as it really is. Those kinds of comments can really push a person to suicide. And it's um it's horrible, horrible. That's some that psychologically and emotionally abusive stuff. Anybody that's, trying to get you to planting the seeds, you should kill yourself, you shouldn't be here, blah blah. That stuff's just garbage, and that's their own issues coming at you. That's nothing to do with you. Um, oh, that's awful. I'm so sorry that you were on the receiving end of that. Yes, and Mrs. Hodges says, never go to clergy. I've had two different ministers' wives give me bad advice as I was desperately searching. And Heather says, we've all been there, Mrs. Hodges. Yes. And again, this normal, decent people tend to think that improved communication can fix everything. And it can't, especially when you're talking about a person who's got some major, major personality issues. If they're a path, if, oh, it's just, yeah, it's frustrating. A lot of times, the book, The Love Languages, the five love languages book will be recommended to couples. And if a person is not, if you have a mental health person, whether it's a spiritual leader or a therapist or whoever, life coach, whoever is not familiar with abuse, especially emotional and psychological abuse, because that stuff can really fly under the radar for a lot of people. It's, they'll oftentimes be like, okay, we got to try to make your relationship work. But what the unintended consequence of what they're saying is, the target of that abuse then starts working overtime trying to make the relationship work, because their partner's not willing to do the work of making it work. And they might act the part. They might act like they're on their best behavior. They might promise the sun and the moon, but their actions don't change, or they just get better at hiding them, and then they surface down the road. So that can be really confusing if, normal, decent people are like, well, I don't, this is how I solve problems. We work on communication, or we go on marriage retreats, or, this is what we do. And if that stuff's not working, then it's just very eye-opening when you realize that there's different types of people in the world. And in order for a relationship or a friendship or any type of dynamic with another person to work, there has to be that level of being team oriented. There has to be that level of, let's work, let's work together, let's compromise, let's reach a solution. There has to be that. If you're dealing with, Pia Melody would say this a person that's coming from this place of immaturity, whether personality disordered or not, if they're coming at you from a place of especially power over mentality, where they're seeking to win, where you're going to therapy and they're saying all the right things, but then they're getting better at hiding their behavior, that's a power over mentality. They're shaming or blaming you, saying you're living in the past, you need to move forward, blah blah. That's a power over. That kind of stuff isn't, there's no team orientedness there, and that needs to be there. So it's just like I said, it's very eye opening when you start seeing um, stuff in a different way. And this is what I was saying earlier too about other people might say, "Oh, you're being very hyper vigilant. You just need to, what happened to you was a one-time thing. You just need to let down your guard and just love like you've never been hurt before. And what happened to you was a fluke. Don't let this destroy you. You just get back out there and start dating and this, that, and the other. And then what happens is people start feeling, targets start feeling profoundly broken because they're like, I can't trust other people. And I'm scared to get back out there. And normal decent people don't understand this because if they've never been on the receiving end of abuse like that, they don't know what's out there. It's sort of like encouraging a person to go back out surfing when there's been all these shark attacks happening. If a normal person, they're not aware of the shark attacks, they don't understand. So it's very different. So it changes the way we go about, for the better. I think, the way we go about learning to trust people again, the way we interact with people, having deal breakers. A lot of people don't have deal breakers. They think that it's mean to have deal breakers, or it's not mature to have deal breakers. That compassionate, um, oftentimes deeply spiritual people, love conquers all, and that it's our job to just heal and fix everybody around us. But we it doesn't work that way, and you know that's very dysfunctional thinking. So there's no shortage of that kind of stuff out there. So yeah, Surf Smurf says, I'm okay with being hypervigilant. Yeah. Like I said, that line in that movie, I just tell people now, like, I'm not paranoid. I'm aware. I'm aware. So, you can do your thing. I think I told you guys I went to go see about, I went to a nurse practitioner about a month ago, and because I decided to get back on an antidepressant. I just feel like I've always had a chemical imbalance since I was a kid. So anyways, and I don't know, I go on and off medication. It's just, it's just frustrating. Anyways, finally I was like, I just need to get on medication and stay on medication. And I was talking to her and I was telling her all the stuff that had been going on with the house fire and, just everything. And she was asking me about, because I already had PTSD like before that. And then after that, I had said, some of these symptoms were flaring up again, but it was okay. I feel like I'm okay. And she said, oh, is there anything that's kind of hyper vigilant? And I was saying, well, I'm just more aware of where exits are now in buildings that I go into. And I have a spare set of keys on a magnetic holder on my car. And, I have a cell phone. I always make sure I have a cell phone charger in my car now. And I'm more aware of how charged my cell phone is. And we keep the pet carriers by the front door. And so she had said, oh, so you're hyper vigilant. And I said, no, nope, just prepared. Like, you just never know. And it's okay. I'm not losing sleep over it. I'm not, anxious about it. It's just, these are some things that I just feel better having. So that's what I do. You know? Uh, yeah, Rob says just aware, just vigilant. Yeah, and it's different. It's different than I was before. But I feel like I'm more prepared when we had, and it didn't even have to be a house fire. Like when we had the house fire, I, my phone, thankfully I was charging it when the fire broke out. So it had decent, but I didn't have my purse on when I left the house. Like, you know, we had nothing to put the cats in. We had, you know, I didn't have my purse. I didn't have a way to get into my car. I- it just was, like this, any situation like that. It just made me realize like I want to do some things a little differently. Oh, I agree. Oh, Maluk says, Dana, I think your awareness is a necessary thing for all of us to stay safe. Yeah, it's situational awareness, I think, for all of us. And um it's really important. And just, like I said, we don't need to like stress out about it, but just that level of awareness is important. Uh let's see. Wonder Woman said, I had a pastor come over to my house and tell me that he only hit me one time, so it wasn't abuse. Punching walls and kicking me and squeezing my wrists wasn't abuse. Yeah. And I can't even tell you how many times I've heard that same thing from therapists too. And this stuff, it's it's just not taught. It's not taught. And it's a problem and it keeps people stuck. And then what's even more crazy making is it's misidentified. People are oftentimes pushed into staying on a relationship. The targets are pushed into doubling up or tripling up their efforts to make the relationship work. And then when they do finally leave and they're like, oh, I was, in this abusive relationship, a lot of times those same people will be like, well, why did you stay for so long? It's like, ah, everybody was pushing me to stay and now you're shaming me for not leaving sooner. It's maddening. So, let's see. As far as videos, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Surf Smurf says, I feel you, Dana. My condo burned. I lost, oh my goodness, I lost 11 cats and my 110-gallon fish tank and my red-tailed boa. Everything else didn't matter. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, that hurts my heart. That's so much. Pets are family, and that's beyond tragic. I am so sorry. But yeah, the fire, you prioritize. It's amazing how much doesn't matter after that. Truly amazing. And the things that do matter that you just hold on to. Okay, let's see. Oh, good for you. She says, I did cat rescue 2 mama cats and their kittens. Good for you. Pet rescue is awesome. There's so many animals out there that need good homes. As far as um, videos for CPTSD, I'm trying to think. There's a guy, I don't know if he has YouTube videos, but his website is fantastic. His name is, I don't know, let me make sure I'm telling you the right thing. I want to say it's Roland Barr. Let me look him up. Oh, no, I think it's Roland Ball. Oh, yes, it is. Okay. Roland Ball, Roland. Last name is B as in boy, AL. And his focus is on complex PTSD. So I came across his website a while ago and I was very impressed. So it looks like he does have videos on YouTube. So that might be somebody that you want to check out. I think, I don't know how much Lisa Romano talks about that. Pia Melody, um, I think is fantastic. Lisa Romano, I think is really great. Um, it's hard to say because I think different speakers resonate with different people for different reasons. And you might even find that in your journey towards healing, that certain people might resonate with you at a certain time and then they stop. like you just kind of have grown, you just need something different. So I'm always a big fan of to kind of know the different speakers that are out there, and um, just kind of see like what is working for you at this stage in your healing, and then going from there. Okay, we'll do one more question and then we're going to go. Kiara says, Dana, how do we start controlling our lives and not just letting life happen to us? It's all about shifting that locus of control, where you're placing that control. So the external locus of control is where things happen to you, that we're just kind of at the mercy of events. Internal locus of control is that feeling of, you know what? Um, it's being accountable for things. It's realizing that anything that we are a willing participant in, that um, kind of anything that we are a willing participant in, um, kind of there's responsibility there. And so that can feel really re-victimizing. And I definitely don't mean it that way. And again, that would be something that had somebody told me that even a year ago, I probably would have attacked them. Because that can seem so re-victimizing. But but the deeper thing there is, if we are a willing participant of it and we are being manipulated or abused or mistreated or something's going on, even though we didn't cause it, we didn't mean for this to happen, we didn't realize what was going on, it's up to us to dig deeper and to figure out, okay, what was going on that we didn't realize this was going on. And that can be a really difficult step to take. And I want to say, in the different phases that I'd listed out, that tends to be in the later phase, like 6 or 7, because most people don't get to that place. It's they can become very reactive and defensive. So thank you, Torstein, for the live stream donation, and says, I just wanted to say thank you to Dana and all the helpful people in the chat. I wish for every one of you to get the happiness you deserve in life. That's a beautiful sentiment. And thank you. Thank you for that. So Kiara, so you are in control of so much. When you have that internal locus of control, you truly are. And when you realize that your life is not a democracy, that other people don't get to vote on it, and you get grounded enough in your reality and in your decisions that you're not a sheet in the wind, you're more like an oak tree, that you're very in tune with what's right, what's nourishing for you and what's toxic for you. So even if you're around a bunch of people that are telling you, oh, you know what, you should really, I don't know, you should really become a teacher, and you don't want to be a teacher, you want to be an engineer, that their opinions aren't swaying you, that you're solid enough in your own decisions and your own understanding of your strengths and weaknesses, and you know what nourishes you, that you're not swayed by the input of other people. You can still listen to other people, but at the end of the day, you're making up your own mind. So you're being very self-directive. This is what's right for me, this is that's not okay with me, this relationship is what's nourishing to me, this is what's not. And then not falling into thinking that other people, because they're older, because they're a spiritual leader, because they have a certain degree, that they somehow know better than you, that you're like, you know what, I know what's best for me. And other people don't get to vote on that. So, because you're the one that has to live with the consequences, not them. Does that make sense? So I would say starting at that point is a good place. Yeah, right. EK says, your life is not a democracy. LOL. The horror malignant BPDs and narcissists feel at this statement. Yes. That's interesting. Let me write that down. Omaluk says, Dana, regarding being on medication for depression, I've had good results with 5-HTP and L-theanine and other supplements. Yeah, I'm willing to try them. 5-HT. Let me see if I can copy that. Can I copy something from the chat? Alicia. Oh, I can. Oh, I just learned something new. Very cool. Okay, guys. I am going to sign off because, like I said, I'm losing my voice, and we have book club tomorrow. We're going to be discussing the self-esteem workbook. So please join us for that at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I hope to see you guys. Tomorrow. So as always, just lots of love to you. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care, and I will see you soon. Okay. Good night.